And we're back with more Monster of the Week. This time around, we're going to be checking out this thing. I'm not going to even try to pronounce the name. I will likely 100% fail. But apparently, this is what happens when a human gets lost in the far realm. Dungeon Dad does awesome D&D videos, and I've learned a lot about these monsters from him, so please make sure to go and support him. But with all of that out of the way, let's get right into it.
Hello and welcome to Monster of the Week, the only show on the internet that exists in all realities at once. This Halloween, we've talked a lot about hags, a little bit about undead.
How's that
the
even
one
possible?
genre of horror we haven't yet touched on is that of cosmic horror. Forces beyond.
I love cosmic horror. I wish there were more media out there that did it well. Oftentimes, it kind of falls flat on its face. Actually, I think Bloodborne kind of does cosmic horror well, at least from what I've heard, considering what the story is based on.
Beyond understanding that bend reality to their whims and drive mortals caught in the midst of the chaos to madness. If that sounds like your thing, this week's monster, the UVUUDAUM, is for you.
UVUUUDAUM? I have a feeling at some point in this video I'm gonna accidentally uwu.
As always, we're going to go over what the UVUUUDAUM is, its lore, ecology, and what it is, because
it looks horrific.
It's a lot to take in. We're also going to go over some plot hooks and ways you might actually use this monster at the game table, and convert it from 3rd edition into 5e D&D, so no matter what version of the game you enjoy, you'll have some stats ready for the game table. This monster...
I don't know, man. This thing looks like it's a monster that came from the movie The Mist. Or, well, if you read the book, then the book from Stephen King.
Monster has been requested a bunch of times over the years, and there's a good reason for that. So today, for the final entry in our spooky month saga, we're peeling back the veil of reality to glimpse what lies beyond. Make sure you pack a lunch.
I did not know that this was a Halloween-themed episode. It is honestly perfect for the time of recording because we are in the spooky season. UVUUUDAUM. Not UVUUUDAUM.
The UVUUUDAUM's one and only appearance is in possibly the most well-known D&D 3rd edition book beyond the core 3, the Epic Level Handbook. We've visited this book in the past on one occasion to talk about the Zigzagool, an elder ice elemental capable of upheaving entire nations. And that really should set the tone.
Bro, there's so many monsters out there in D&D. I was unaware of the amount of lore. Of course, all these extremely highly advanced stuff we likely will never see in our current D&D campaign, but I just love learning about them. They're really cool.
For what you can expect to find in this book. The Epic Level Handbook is all about monstrous threats, feats, and spells for characters who go beyond the base level cap of 20 into an epic tier and progress as high as level 30. If you think a level 20 character is basically a demigod, a level 30 character is going to be challenging the gods for dominance. The UVUUUDAUM in its original printing clocks in at a challenge rating of 27, which actually puts it on the low end of CR monsters in this book. So, what exactly is an UVUUUDAUM? Well, the original text describes them as creatures born in the wake of madness. They hail from the Far Realm, which is a plane that houses many aberrations found across D&D lore.
We've seen these guys
It's a chaotic plane where all the rules of reality as we know them basically cease to be. Everything that lives there is extremely dangerous to a creature from the rest of the multiverse, and just being in the Far Realm can kill you if you're not natively from there. It's also very hard to get to and from the Far Realm on purpose, so thankfully, most of the time, the things that live there stay there.
Yeah, thank goodness. You're not just gonna randomly walk out. Alright, I'm gonna head out on my journey, and then you fall through the floor and end up in the back rooms. Or, in this case, the Far Realms, and just get eaten or turned into some sort of horrific monster. Although that probably has happened to some poor fool, or probably some magician who might have been a little too ambitious in their studies.
It's all very clearly and obviously inspired by the Cthulhu mythos, so without doing a deep dive into the subject, just think of the Far Realm as the place gods of chaos and madness live. But on occasion, when the Far Realm leaks into another plane in the multiverse, either by accident or intent, the odd creature might come through. In the UVUUUDAUM, is one such creature. Like many of the creatures native to the Far Realm, UVUUDAUM are horrible to look at. They're sort of like Driders, except instead of their lower half being a spider, it's a long trunk sprouting 6 humanoid arms, which it uses as legs, and its upper half is a continuation of this trunk that ends in a massive obsidian spike in place of where its head would normally be. And it's got 2 more humanoid arms that it actually uses as arms. The UVUUDAUM do also make an appearance in the 3rd edition book Manual of the Planes, though this is more of a cameo than an actual source of information about them. In the section about the Far Realm, there is a depiction of our creature along with several other Far Realm denizens just kinda hanging out. The only reason I even bring this up is because it shows a little bit of diversity not only in the creature's appearance, but also its fashion choices. In both canon depictions, the UVUUDAUM is wearing clothes, which is really interesting to me because not a lot of Eldritch horrors take the time to put on a suit jacket.
So, no. It's probably because that's what the original human that ended up in the Far Realms was wearing before they became this, right?
Before heading off to spread madness through the multiverse. In their first appearance, they seem to be dressed in torn up rags, implying that the clothes aren't really all that important. However, in their second depiction from the Manual of the Planes, they are wearing a full-on cloak of some kind. Not only is this garment in fantastic condition, it's also very colorful and patterned. When I saw this, my first thought was, why the hell does a creature without eyes care about clothing, let alone something like what we see in the second image? You could chalk this up to Far Realm weirdness, but to me it implies that the UVUUDAUM was once something more than just a mess of arms with a head spike. Personally, I think that the UVUUDAUM used to be human, or something akin to a human. A humanoid.
Wait, I think? So there isn't any actual lore explaining it? But I mean, with what limited information I currently have, I do agree with this theory, because I don't think anybody in the Far Realm is kind of knitting people together some nice clothes to wear. When you're some sort of chaos god, do you even care about that stuff?
If you will. Part of why the Far Realm is so dangerous is because of the way it twists other creatures into its own image. So what
Is it heresy that I haven't seen Akira yet? It probably is. Like, this channel is called The Legit Weebs. There are so many classic anime that I have not seen before, and yet I always get the references to this show. Every single show that I've seen has to have at least one scene where they reference the Akira motorcycle scene. Okay, every single one is probably an exaggeration, but it is just so noticeable. Heck, even Arcane Season 1 had a scene where they referenced it. Not gonna say any spoilers just in case, but if you watched it, you know.
I think is being implied here is that the UVUUDAUM is actually a humanoid being that was exposed to the madness of the Far Realm, and it transformed them into what we see now. This not only explains the clothing, but also the humanoid arms. A lot of the stuff from the Far Realm tends to be very tentacly, but these guys clearly have humanoid arms and leg arms, which is really weird. So I think that these two separate depictions of the UVUUDAUM are showing us two different people that became UVUUDAUM in the Far Realm. The first one might be someone who's been trapped there for a really long time, to the point where their clothing has deteriorated into literal rags. And the second image is showing us a more recent UVUUDAUM who still has their cloak intact. The other possibility is that there's some kind of hierarchy among the UVUUDAUM that exists, like a sort of noble class that calls the shots and gets to dress nice. I don't know, there's lots of reasons that this discrepancy might exist, but the other thing about this that really throws me for a loop is the second image depicts an UVUUDAUM who does not have humanoid hand legs. Its legs and feet are more spider-like, though it does still have humanoid arms at the shoulder. All of this, at the end of the day, is probably just two different artists' interpretation of the same fringe tier monster.
Probably.
And it certainly wouldn't be the first time two creatures from the Far Realm of the same species looked a little different from one another. I mean, as the realm of chaos and madness, there's a baked-in alibi for any discrepancies like this. But whatever the case, this is all just my own theorizing about their origin, and I think it's more fun instead of just writing it off as it's Far Realm weirdness or...
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like in 40k, or I suppose Warhammer in general, like, there can't really be an accurate representation of Tzeentch demons because they're supposed to, in lore, be constantly changing all the time because of their chaos weirdness, and Zinch just likes to fuck around. But even so, there has to be some sort of artistic depiction for us to actually see and buy models of. So yeah.
Or the artist drew two different things to try and come up with a justification for why these two art pieces are so different. There's no canonical explanation for their existence that I was able to find aside from their ties to the Far Realm, which is kind of fun because it lets us try to figure it out. As far as their actual lore goes, the UVUUDAUM are known to take great pleasure in exposing other planes of existence to the horrible truth of the Far Realm. By their very presence, they spread the Far Realm's influence, and they love to watch entire worlds shift into chaos as the influence of the Far Realm slowly takes over like a poison. They whisper unspeakable truths from their home.
Unspeakable truths, eh? Yeah, you can't say this in any anime forum. You're gonna die. Somebody's gonna put you in their Death Note. I actually did really enjoy Death Note, though. We don't talk about the live-action series, however. Like, that doesn't exist to me.
Plane beyond the veil of reality by using their immense telepathic prowess, hoping to find anyone on the other side who dares to listen. Those who are living on, say, the material plane that have ever had an erratic, troubling thought or a sudden anxiety could chalk it up to an UVUUDAUM trying to bridge the gap. And those that hyper-focus on these messages from beyond can sometimes become corrupted by the Far Realm's influence, and eventually this may lead to a portal opening up between the two locales. That's something interesting about
the whispers of chaos. Don't listen to them. If you let them in, then they'll just switch over from their plane of existence to ours. A common theme for stuff like this. We see this in like a ton of different media whenever it comes to like demonic or chaos or evil stuff.
About the Far Realm just as a location is it seems so heavily tied with the power of thought that just bridging this gap with a telepathic bond between the UVUUDAUM and, say, a guy who works at Denny's might be the last thing that the UVUUDAUMs need to create a portal. Should this ever happen, it must be dealt with in a timely manner, or else the entire plane could be subsumed by the Far Realm and cut off from the rest of reality in a troublingly short amount of time. But let's say, for argument's sake, that an UVUUDAUM or 5 make their way to the material plane and you need to fight them off. Here's what you're gonna have to overcome to do that.
Alright, here we go. I mean, first off, I would guess because they have some sort of AoE influence to them, that anything that they touch or maybe get near is affected by the Far Realm. You'd have to have some sort of protection or divine protection from that, yeah? And what would it be able to do in combat? Probably some sort of psychic abilities? Or maybe it just throws rocks at you.
The original version of this monster clocked in with a CR of 27. After adjusting a few numbers to account for 5th edition's bounded accuracy, and otherwise changing very little about this monster, we end up with a CR 25 creature in D&D 5th edition. This puts them on par with some of the most dangerous creatures found across all of D&D 5e,
oh my god.
And you'll soon see why.
Oh wait, I just realized. Is this a particular... Wait, let me go back a little bit. Oh yeah, 100% it is. This is a particular screen cap from the Incredibles movie. When Mr. Incredible himself is looking at all the robots and their threat rating versus the heroes that got taken out by them. What a reference.
The UVUUDAUM is large in size. They have an unnervingly fast reaction on account of their perfect 30 in dexterity, and they move at a staggering 80 feet per round, which is really fast considering they don't have any feet. Their pool of 336 hit points might seem like a lot, but considering the CR of this monster, even with an AC of 20, they're actually a little bit lean on the defense front. But I promise this is for a very good reason. In the Epic Level Handbook, one of the new features introduced was Epic Level Spells. To quote the source material on Epic Level Spellcasters, such a spellcaster is released from the shackles imposed by level-dependent spellcasting. The classification of power by level loses all meaning to the caster of epic spells. In other words, there's some powerful shit in this book, As a monster who primarily uses magic to defeat their enemies, the UVUUDAUM has access to a bunch of regular spells including Haste, Wall of Force, and
Hey, based JoJo watcher? I see you. After all, at the end of the day, everything is a JoJo's reference.
Time Stop, but it also has access to 2 particularly powerful epic spells. Since we don't have epic spells in 5th edition D&D, I converted these 2 spells into abilities that just appear on the creature's stat block. The first is called Contingent Resurrection. This trait allows the UVUUDAUM to come back to life. Whenever the creature is killed, if it's the first time it died that day, as long as a single shred of its body still remains, and yes, that includes the dust left behind by the Disintegrate spell, it basically casts true resurrection on itself after 1 minute goes by.
That's not even fair.
So unless it's killed by something that utterly annihilates it, such as a Sphere of Annihilation, this bad boy is coming back for round 2 with all of its spell slots and maximum HP. The second epic level spell the UVUUDAUM has access to is one of the most fun names I've ever seen show up for a spell. Nailed to the Sky is an action that allows the UVUUDAUM to target a creature within 120 feet and teleport them into space.
What?
If you fail your saving throw in the blink of an eye, you're transported into orbit around whatever planet or plane you happen to be on.
Oh yeah! Every time I see Vector. But what, bro just sends you to space? That's a really funny ability, actually, not gonna lie. I honestly wouldn't mind my player character dying because of that. It'll be one heck of a way to go.
You immediately start to suffocate, and you also take cold damage every round you're stuck there. This ability might function somewhat differently depending on what plane and what setting you're playing in. For example, if you were to use this in Theros, I would argue it simply transports you to the Nyx. Or if, say, you're on the plane of fire, you probably don't take cold damage every round, but you're gonna take fire damage instead. Although I guess that's just kind of true of everywhere on the plane of fire. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is up to the DM's discretion. But the main thing here is that you are stuck unless you can fly. And if you can fly, it takes you 4 hours to get back down to the planet's surface. And if you can't fly,
you're just stuck.
Good luck. The easiest way to negate this, of course, is with a teleport spell of your own or some other high-level shenanigans. But there was no way I was going to exclude an ability this ridiculously cool from the creature's stat block.
Yeah,
but aside from those 2 epic-level spells...
I mean, considering that it's also in the book with a bunch of epic-level spells for the player, then you probably can combat it in one way or another. Maybe get a little creative as well. I don't know anything about these epic level spells though, because I kind of started learning about D&D during 5th edition here, so just an educated guess based off the context.
Turned abilities and the other spells I already mentioned, the UVUUDAUM has a ton of magical tools at its disposal for doing battle. However, I'm sure all of you are looking at this head spike and wondering what the deal with that is. Don't you worry. It can attack with that too.
Of course.
The UVUUDAUM can take 1 head spike attack per turn, which is honestly kind of weird for a creature of this challenge rating. Most monsters rated this high get like 50 attacks per round, and the UVUUDAUM only gets 1, but that's because it can make this attack from 15 feet away. It has a plus 18 to hit, and if it does hit, it deals 10d10 piercing damage.
10d10 piercing? What? Oh god. Ooh. Yikes. I'm still very curious though how this thing actually sees or senses creatures around it. I don't see any eyes. It probably just magic. It senses the flow of magic, is my guess.
And it drains you for 2d4 points of wisdom. I talk about this anytime a creature with ability drain shows up on the channel. Ability drain is a terrifying prospect. In the instance of the UVUUDAUM specifically, this ability drain is sucking away your sanity. If it knocks...
Well, it sucks away your sanity and, well, I don't know if this is how it works. I think it probably is, but you're gonna fail your wisdom saves. Thankfully, we've yet to run into any kind of monster that drains your stats. I don't know if there is any commonly used anymore.
Knocks you down to 0 wisdom, you don't just die. You go totally mad and become an NPC under the DM's control. an NPC who views all other creatures as hostile. And because we're dealing with such a high level creature, unlike most other ability drain in 5th edition, this ability drain is permanent. At least until you can get someone to cast Greater Restoration on you.
Oh my god, I didn't know this. I never knew about this mechanic at all. That's... Oh, Jesus. I thought there was some sort of limitations to it, like, oh yeah, you can do a save to avoid being charmed or like mind controlled or whatever, but draining all of your wisdom makes you an NPC for the DM. The more you know.
Any party going up against an UVUUDAUM would be wise to have that spell prepared. Now this is all shaping up to be a pretty brutal monster, but of course because we're dealing with an epic level threat here, there are many pieces to this multi-legged pie. The creature also projects an aura out to 30 feet in all directions around it. This aura is literally the far realm's influence seeking to twist the reality where the UVUUDAUM currently finds itself present in any way that it can. As such, any living creature who starts their turn in that aura has to make a wisdom save, and if they fail, they are confused a la the confusion spell. This is gonna really shut down some melee-focused builds if precautions are not taken. And as dangerous as that might be for some characters, it of course pales in comparison to our final trait, the UVUUDAUM's regeneration. As a being of the far realm, this thing is constantly growing and shrinking with mass. It regenerates 15 hit points per round, and that remains true even if it gets knocked down to 0 unless it takes cold, fire, or radiant damage. So much like the trolls we all know and love, the player will have to get around this regeneration if they want to claim victory. Being susceptible to 3 different damage types, all pretty common damage types too, is going to make this relatively easy to navigate. However, it's definitely going to come up. But hopefully, all of that has painted a sufficient picture for you of what the UVUUDAUM is.
Are there any other monsters that have this regen trait? Like, would that be considered a trait? And do they have like a common weakness shared between them like this? Because like in a game like Total War, any units that have passive regen on them will also likely have a weakness to fire, which, you know, makes sense. I would assume when it comes to D&D, these elemental weaknesses would also likely apply.
And what it's capable of. In combat, they're likely going to start things off with a casting of haste and go from there. And because of the spells they have access to and their very powerful abilities, honestly, an unprepared party is going to get smoked by this thing, even at high level. So if you intend to use an UVUUDAUM or even a few of them in a combat encounter, I highly recommend building up to it. Think about giving your players some clues as to what they might be in for. Whether or not they abide those clues is completely up to them. But I think that brings us to a perfect stopping point where we can move on and talk about how to actually use the UVUUDAUM to tell a story. So let's talk about that.
Love these sections. Always cool to learn about the plot hooks.
As extremely powerful creatures from a distant plane of existence, anytime the UVUUDAUM shows up, they're likely going to be the center of attention. If you happen to have a far realm leak in your campaign, the story beat kind of writes itself. A bunch of horrible aberrations might come streaming into the material plane, and among them is an UVUUDAUM or maybe even a group of them. Fun fact, a group of UVUUDAUM is called a madness. But if there isn't already a portal open...
Why is English such a weird language, man? A murder of crows. A madness of UVUUDAUM. Why can't we just call it a group?
Opening up to the far realm, maybe that's what the UVUUDAUM is actually setting out to accomplish. It could be whispering sweet nothings to the people of a city, hoping to drive them mad and commit acts that will thin the veil between their respective worlds. And that's how you could find yourself fighting against a cult. However, the individual in question being whispered to could also be a party member. Maybe the one whispering to them is their patron if you happen to have a Pact of the Great Old One warlock in your game. All these seemingly random esoteric tasks the patron is whispering for them to do is actually going to culminate in them opening a gateway to the far realm. The other possibility is that an UVUUDAUM has somehow become trapped on the material plane and it wants to get home. So perhaps it's fostered a cult with the hopes of using them to open that portal and escape. Or maybe it wants to open this portal to simply let its brethren through to this side. Because after all, a madness of UVUUDAUMs is an extremely dangerous threat. Because while they may hail...
I have no idea how you deal with that. You gotta have some sort of AoE epic level spells and shit. An entire army, although the army would probably die in the process.
From the plane of chaos and madness that's extremely far away, they are, in their own way, actually quite intelligent and logical. Obviously, they operate on a version of logic and morality that would be incomprehensible to most mortals, but there is motivation and personality behind their actions. Not to mention how stupidly powerful they are. Given that they can speak all languages and use telepathy out to 500 feet, they could even foster a following without ever revealing their true nature, possibly even masquerading as a god, either new or established. And perhaps the UVUUDAUM has even become trapped on the material plane by design. A previous group of heroes was too weak to destroy the creature, but they managed to trap it deep underground in an ancient temple or something. Somewhere that the creature can't escape, but it might still be able to use its telepathy. Perhaps it reaches out to nearby strangers and slowly forms one of those aforementioned cults to try and free it from its prison. I also feel it goes basically without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyways. If your party happens to be on the Far Realm for something unrelated, an encounter with an UVUUDAUM could be really interesting. Even if it isn't a combat situation, just talking to a telepathic nightmare creature like this has lots of potential to be weird and far realmy. And who knows? Maybe they even find some common ground. I like the idea of these creatures being a potential rival to some other horrible abomination like a Mind Flayer hive, or maybe even a powerful demigod. While the UVUUDAUM are extremely dangerous and liable to just straight up kill lots of people, manipulating them into fighting a common enemy could be a smart move. And lastly,
yeah, for sure. I mean, because it can communicate telepathically, and in lore, it kind of is supposed to do that in order to seek a way into the other planes, it massively opens up the possibilities for certain plot hooks to be used. I mean, you can even use it without having it ever show up in the story either. Like, the entire point of the campaign is to stop the summoning of said UVUUDAUM by stopping whatever cultists are listening to these whispers and whatnot.
if you like this creature conceptually, but you don't really care for the Far Realm stuff or anything else to do with their origins, they can make for a great high-level catch-all abomination. Maybe instead of being from the Far Realm, they're the result of some powerful wizards flubbing a dangerous ritual that they've all been fused together into this nightmarish creature. It would explain not only all the arms, but also their extreme magic proficiency. Or perhaps you rebrand them as an undead creature created using the bodies of great heroes that some lich has grafted together. Or, if you're in Theros, maybe they're a physical manifestation of a god that had so many conflicting and violent beliefs about them that it just coalesced into whatever this is.
I never considered rebranding a monster to fit in with whatever lore your campaign is going for, but that's actually a really cool idea. Considering its ambiguous design, that it's kind of a mishmash of a lot of things. All of these possibilities make a whole lot of sense without the added context of, you know, it's an UVUUDAUM that hails from the far realms. You could just have it inside of a story that is completely unrelated to all of that.
Ultimately, there are so many different ways you can use this creature. I'd love to hear about your ideas in the comments down below, and hopefully this at least scratched the eldritch horror itch that so many of us get this time of year.
The fact that this guy can just send you into space is really funny. I do like the concept of this monster though, and how flexible of an approach you can take with it, considering, you know, its very nature. I'd be interested to know how you guys ended up using this particular creature, if you have, or if you've kind of like rebranded it, as Dungeon Dad said in the video. How did you guys use it in your campaigns, or how did a DM use it in a campaign that you played? I always like reading those comments. We still get comments every day on the False Hydra video, people sharing their stories, so let me know. But that's gonna be it from me today, my dudes. As always, make sure to go support Dungeon Dad for an amazing video, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Later, dudes.